Hello Thistledown Gang, welcome back to my channel if you've already been here. If not, hi. It's absolutely lovely to have you here. Please stay, and by that I mean subscribe. It's part 5. It's the finale of the music box videos. At least for this series, and then I'll need a good long rest from music boxes, I guess. But to jog your memories a bit, let's have a recap. I put the thing on a new base, painted the inside and outside, put another piece of paperboard on top, painted it some more, made this kitschy figurine look just as kitschy but made it tasteful, and gave her a new dress, no more flamingo leg. Put some flowers and ribbons on the side, and bumblebees, reframed the mirror, put up some stars, floored the sun, and that brings us up to now and the glory of high gloss varnish. While I'm literally glossing over that music box, I'm happy to tell you that the move went well, and while the van renting service was a bit, let's say faulty, our friends are absolutely stellar and fantastic and really came through, and it was the best and smoothest move I've ever experienced. We've been living in the new place for over a month now, and it's really lovely, and we have such great light, and it's coming along really, really well. What's not great is the state of the world as we know it. It's never been, but the current conflict is new and not at all that far away, and the pictures that you see everywhere bring out trauma in the older living relatives around me, and that's really hard to see sometimes. It's closer to home than any other war that's been going on in the last 32 years I've been alive, so it's scary, of course. It's amazing to see how people are coming together, however, to help, to demonstrate, to house refugees, so there might be hope for humanity just yet. I feel incredibly privileged these days, and my thoughts go out to those afflicted. There is a link to the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center in the description, because I can only speak from a point of emotion and not with the authority of someone very well informed, because I just glance over the news coverage from time to time, because there's just so much capacity in my brain for all of this, and I'm really sorry about it. But they can give you the information if you want it. And now I'm going back to what I do to cope with a scary world like this, which is making pretty things and stupid jokes. There is no smooth transition here. Sorry. Hardware. I went for these adorable little owl feet because Rotbart, the sorcerer in Swan Lake, can turn into an owl. Sure, they were cute and all, but it was this reference to the source material that made me truly happy. I stuck them on with my all-purpose glue. I guess I could have used small nails, and I only thought of that now that I was writing this voiceover as well, but I don't plan on using this box as a stepping stool, and I can still do that if it ever comes down. Whatever. So it doesn't have to be super stable. The little drawer looked very empty and forlorn, so I got out some of my metal trim and glued it all around. I then stuck on this ring because the screw to attach it with was far too long for the thin plastic of the drawer, because they usually hand this out for putting it onto actual, furniture. And short spoiler, that didn't hold. I used up some more trim from my craft hoard around the lid because it had essentially the perfect length and colours. There's even some red for the roses and some yellow for the ribbons in there, and it's absolutely perfect, and I'm super happy I used it because I really, really like it. Now, for the last piece of hardware, it's time to bring out the tiny big guns. I opted for a combination of screws and glue here because the ledge went over the trim. It's far too pretty to hide it. I got the lower part of the ledge to be where it's supposed to by gluing it on first while fixing it to its counterpart, and this way I could drill right through the holes in just the right place. And yes, I couldn't find one of the tiny screws and I had to improvise. It works, but of course I found the right one a few days after doing this, which was kind of frustrating, but I was not motivated enough to change it out. Maybe someday, probably not. While the screws work quite well on the lid because there's this inlay that covers them up once they're through the outer wall, I had the tips poking through at the box proper, and not only does that look kinda mangy, it's also a bit of a hazard. Luckily, I had these flat wooden beads in my hoard that fit on there quite well, and they don't look too bad either. I mean, it's okay. You don't see it most of the time. Another tiny thing that bothered me aesthetically were the cross recesses on the screws for the latch. It just didn't look great with the rest of the piece because, I mean, we're kind of trying to do Edwardian kitsch as interpreted by the 80s through the lens of the 2020s, and it looked a bit industrial and modern for that, and that was a lot of sentence and a lot of errors. I don't know. The solution lay in my trusty friend wood spackle that I think I already used for some part of the construction in part 1 of this series, but definitely used for my ebook cover video, which if you haven't seen it, you should watch it because that turned out really well. I'm really proud of that. Honestly, if I didn't have proof on video that this isn't the case, I'd sometimes like to think that I do most of my crafts only with a Swiss Army knife and cloth pegs. I don't, but that's what it feels like. When the first coat of paint on the screws dried, I painted the Thistledown Gang monogram and the finishing date onto the bottom. I like dating my crafts. I've even sometimes stitched that into my self-made clothing, like in the hemline or the waistband. It also gives me an excuse to play with lettering. I mixed an antique gold color for the screws that matched the hardware, and of course I mixed up too much, so the lettering got some shading as well. You can say a lot about me, but not that I don't go into unnecessary detail and then totally remember to varnish the rest of the underside of the box. Oh yeah, and I had to reattach 2 of the leggies because I'd been too impatient while sticking them on the first time. While we're at it, I can already tell you that the gluing on of the little rat didn't survive the move. The 5 little points at which she's attached to the box don't really support her weight too well, and it's also on paper, essentially, or on paint, and I carefully hold her whenever I open the box, but I think that's worth it, and I honestly even feared the whole thing would fall apart when we dragged it from one flat to another, so that's a win in my book. After the move, while technically the music box was done, I decided to make a few improvements here and there. The most interesting one is that I hadn't anticipated how the paint would make the drawers so much thicker and higher that it would be almost impossible to get it out of the slot. The ring handle actually got ripped off because the drawer wouldn't move and I was too stubborn not to try. So I got out the Swiss Army knife once again, not sponsored, I've had this one since I was 7. Swiss Army knives, if you hear that, feel free to sponsor me. And started scraping off a bit on the top of each side. I also scraped off the paint at the sides. Sure, it's not as pretty, but it's still okay, and this way it at least works, and that's kind of important here. Once it slid in and out without any issue, I filed it down a bit so it would look less haphazard. Haphazard. I like the word, but I have issues pronouncing it. I like to use cheap nail files from the German equivalent of the dollar store for things like that, because they're easy to handle and get along really well with these slightly softer materials, and also they're incredibly cheap, like 20 for euro or something. Last but not least, I went to the hardware store, because I needed new flat related things anyway, and got one little single screw for the ring handle. I made sure to take my hardware with me to check that it actually fit in there. And once again, out comes the knife to widen the hole a bit, because the tiny, very handy drill just isn't wide enough for this kind of job. Was I really afraid to break the stupid thing when I screwed it on? Hell yes! But now we have a functioning drawer, and that means we're done and you get a few decently lighted shots of the finished thing. After I glue the little rat back on. But now, let's recall what this thing looked like when I found it at the thrift store. It was not completely ugly, but it's not exactly super pretty either, and why does she wear a pink dress? This is swan lake, it's supposed to be white. It's fucking Swan Lake! I'm not monetized, I'm allowed to swear! I'm really happy with how this turned out. I try to be honest with myself and admit it when I put a lot of work into something that didn't work. This might be relevant to one of the next few videos. But this time, I think I'm really content with the work outcome ratio. I'm also always delighted when I know that I learned something, a new technique like how to paint bumblebees, especially with acrylics, or new things about my tools or mediums I haven't worked with before, like the figurines, or that these gold stars don't really get along with that multi-purpose glue. I learned that varnish is so much fun because it makes things so shiny, but it also attracts dust like a fucking magnet, and I should have paid more attention to that when I filmed these final shots. The flaws that annoy me, and to be honest, I mostly only noticed these when I was watching the video and not while I was handling the thing, are a bristle or lash that got stuck under the acrylics in one of the side motifs, the scratched up cheap plastic mirror that was already there, so that's not my fault, the fact that Odette's hair will need touching up time and again because she bumps into the mirror frame, the unvarnished bottom that I will probably never fix even though it's a really easy task, and a few specks of glue on the inside that you can only see in good camera lighting anyway. So that's actually a pretty okay bottom line. My favorite features, because I also want to say nice things about my project in no particular order, are the gold buttons on the little rat's dress, and the freckles on her shoulders, and the ripped tights, and the band-aid on her knee, and the strands of hair on the sides of her face, and the dark red wash in the folds of her skirt. I love the gold stars inside, and the way the H frame turned out, and the tiny knot of the source material in the old feet. Yes, I'm incredibly smug about that. So proud of that. And last but not least, and I think secretly that's my favorite thing, it's the bumblebees, and especially those wings. I'm so proud of those wings. I had so much fun making this, and the aesthetic was so fun to work with, and yes, it was a stupid labor of love, it's not very useful or anything, but I'm happy with it. It's the fanciest little trinket box I've ever had. It pleases the little romantic kitsch kid inside me very, very much. You know, the one who dresses up for tea parties with the teddies in the garden, and maybe that dress actually isn't that fancy, but don't tell the kid. It's a part of the make-believe. I'm proud of what I made, and that's a scarce thing for me to say, because usually I can't dwell on my projects. I always feel like I need to rush to bigger, more impressive things, and I basically don't look at them anymore. But this one actually lives in my room now. I haven't found a good place for it yet, but it's there. It's right next to me on my windowsill so far. But now I can't open the window. That's stupid. I'm also glad that you stuck with me and the little rat for 5 episodes. Splitting this project into parts was such a healthy choice for me. I hope you enjoyed the journey and you're looking forward to the next one, because I would like to have you on board. Thank you for your patience during the move, and thank you so much for watching. Have the most wonderful time possible in these strange and fucking scary days. Until we meet again. Farewell.